and I'm sitting in for Kevin. Kevin is, like we like to say in the industry, and he's actually got some commitments and couldn't host. But we have what today I think is going to be an exciting show, Catholic IRL, and we're basically this show is we try to do it on Sundays and talk about things that are a little bit more topical than we do during the rest of the week. And today, obviously, as you would imagine, the hot topic of the week is Ukraine, and that's going to probably be where we start our conversation today, and then maybe move on the FSSP and some issues going on there. As Pope Francis having the use of the 1962 missile, which and probably nefarious. We'll kind of talk through what might be going on there, and it should be a great show. So I'm joined today by good Boyd and Eric. And Boyd, if you want to just, guys, if you want to talk a little bit about yourselves and give us a little bit of your background. Boyd, for it.
Well, I'm Boyd Elliott, father of 12. I'm here in Omaha, just a couple blocks from the church. I grew up, well, not really any religion. In my middle school years, I joined the Methodist Church, then went on later, 20 or so, joined the Novus Ordo Church, got married to my wife, Kelly. About child number 6 through our 12 children, we found out about Mary Immaculate here. And so that was 18 years ago. And so we've been coming here, trying to do the best the best that we can to live our faith. And that's kind of it in a quick nutshell.
Oh, did we lose Dan?
I
think we might have lost Dan.
I think we did.
Oh,
there he is.
Yeah, this was going to be fun. Yeah, if I'm dropping off,
a little twist.
Yeah, you guys just have at it, right? Okay. I'm not sure, and we're trying to upgrade my connection a little bit here, but Eric, did you start talking about yourself?
No, I didn't. So okay, I'm blessed enough to be a cradle sede vacantist, born into the true church, which was very lucky, I guess you could say. First 17 years of my life, I was at a independent parish. So, from one of the 9 priests that broke away from Econ, SSPX, and then halfway through, when I was 17, we went to the CMRI. Started going there and have been there ever since. I did move from Denver down to Colorado Springs for work and to be closer to family and stuff. So that's where I'm living now. I'm not a father of 12. Sometimes it feels like I'm on my way there. 4.5. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. We're working to try to see if we can get a wired connection here. I'm trying to work out the wireless, and it's a little sketchy. But anyways, yeah. So today the discussion was around Ukraine. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm looks like I might be losing you.
Yep.
Nope. We got you.
Okay, excellent. And as we know, it's in the news, and I think what the most we can say is we know something is going on in the Ukraine from a geopolitical point of view, and we don't know exactly what. We know we live in a time when the truth is out there. We know the truth is out there, right? We also know that the truth is shrouded in such a huge fog of lies that it's almost impossible to see the truth. So it kind of leads us to where the best we can do is to kind of try to our own basis of the truth based on, we kind of start with our own confirmation, our own biases, and kind of build from there. And what I think is interesting is, at least for my what we develop even in the last few days, is everything from the Okay, wait a minute here. It looks like we have our fourth on, Frankie.
Hi, yeah,
Howdy.
hello. Apologies for the late coming. I had some trouble connecting to the link in the first few minutes of the show.
No, that's okay. That's you and me both. Oh, yeah, I'm having some trouble too, but we'll fight through it. But anyways, I'm starting to talk about Ukraine a little bit here, and I think you've got a couple of different narratives that behind this, right? And everybody, so many different opinions on what's going on and where we are and all that, and all the way from the most black of black pill, where there are people I think who believe that Russia Ukraine is the beginning of the end. It's maybe the Gog Magog war of the Old Testament, and it's that Putin and Zelensky are just puppets of the globalist masters and all that. And it's a step in the direction towards their wanting to depopulate the earth and enslave the other 10%, right? I mean, that's one really dark view of the whole thing. On the other side, extreme is the white pill that group there that believes that globalism is dying, that Putin's a patriot, that Trump's still a patriot, Trump's sitting in the background, and basically this is a final stand. Ukraine, the final basically money laundering operation of the Biden liberal type establishment, and Putin's going to take him out, and it's going to be great from there. So I mean, those are kind of your two extremes. We know pretty much that the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? I mean, it's not going to be either of those extremes. And what we wanted to talk about today was basically from a Catholic perspective. Let's talk it through. I kind of wanted to talk for a little bit about the political side of this, and we'll get into some spiritual. We'll get into the fear, our faith, all that kind of stuff. I kind of wanted to get around through here talking about the politics of it. So Eric, if you don't mind kind of getting us started, what do you think is going on in Ukraine? Who is Vladimir Putin? Who Zelensky? Basically, what do you think?
Yeah, well, you had your two colors of pills there, and the first thing that came to my mind, well, can I have a gray or a blue or something, some other color? No, I mean, I think Putin is, an autocratic, opportunistic dictator. I think he is smart with his timing, right? I mean, if he looks at the situation of the world, we have the West, fighting over masks and mandates and woke cultures and all that. You have, a Europe that is completely almost dependent on his oil. You have, probably the weakest president in his lifetime. You have the most partisan and divided Congress in his lifetime. It's like, I guess we shouldn't be surprised that he's taking this time now to invade. And yeah, I'm certainly not a Putin sympathist, but I have to agree, like what he's doing, he's right on the timing.
Right, and timing, as in you think it has to do with Trump, and he was not going to invade while Trump was in power, and now he senses weakness with Biden.
Potentially, I mean, that's part of it, right? That's probably putting too much of an emphasis just on the U.S. or just on the president. But I do think that that's certainly a factor, right? I think a lot of people are now looking like, the Republicans are in pretty good shape for the next 10 years, given everything that's been going on in the country lately. And so probably, take advantage of this time. And really what I think he wants to do is make Ukraine another Belarus, right? Another sort of sub-Russian state, just to kind of expand his border out and give himself a little buffer there with Russia.
So Eric, do you think he's trying to establish the old USSR?
I don't know if he's doing that, that if that's his main goal, but I mean, I'm sure that is something similar to that, right? Take advantage of the time and the opportunity so that the world is presenting now, and grow his empire or his country the best he can while he can.
Right.
And again, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in his head. I'm sure there's a few screws loose there too.
Yeah.
Right. I think to be in that position of power, there pretty much has to be. So Frankie, we kind of threw right into the way here. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, and then give us your thoughts on Ukraine?
Yeah, sure. So I'm relatively young. I'm 19. I converted to the Catholic faith around 5 years ago. I was in the Novus Ordo for a year and a half before embracing the position commonly known as sedevacantism, the idea that Francis does not enjoy the authority of Christ. And I was baptized conditionally because I was baptized as a child in the Novus Ordo by Father Arnold Trauner of the Institute of the Mother of Good Counsel, pardon me, about a year and a half ago. Father Trauner was ordained by Bishop de Galarreta in the society, but he left after about 20 years in the society and became a sedevacantist. And yeah, I was brought up in the West Midlands part of the UK, Birmingham, and now I live a little bit up north in a city called Leeds. My thoughts on Ukraine. The two different pills that you gave, the two extremes, I think they both catastrophically missed the mark. I don't think that we're in the end times because the conversion of the Jews hasn't happened yet. And that's something that, well, does need to happen first. And I also tend to believe that we'll see a brief period of, the reign of Mary and peace to the world. Not as a dogma or anything like that, but I tend to believe something along those lines. And the other end of, well, I just think the patriot thing with Trump is absurd. Because I mean, well, they said he was going to come back into power by the inauguration, and then it was sometime in March or April. Yeah, it's absurd. It's not happening. Putin he's not the conservative man that everyone makes him out to be. I think he said that communism comes from the Holy Bible. I think he took the fall of the Soviet Union personally because he worked for the KGB in Eastern Germany, and he seems to be on a mission that wants to if not the USSR, reestablish the glory and the power that Russia had on the world stage that it used to, which it simply just doesn't anymore when China and the USA and things like that. As to his goal here, I certainly agree with Eric. I think he wants to enact a regime change in Ukraine to make it akin to Belarus. If he were to want to re-establish the former borders of the USSR, that would certainly mean World War, because the rest of the countries that were formerly part of the USSR are now part of NATO. So that would mean going to war with the UK, the USA. It would be World War. So I generally tend to side with Ukraine, not because, I mean, I'm aware that the people that side with Ukraine are people like the mainstream media and Joe Biden and things like that. But then on the other hand, the people siding with Russia are people like China and North Korea, i.e. communists. There are bad people on both sides of this here. My personal view looking at it is the reasons for which Russia has invaded Ukraine, to me, does not seem to be a just war. When I see people in Ukraine fighting to defend their own country from foreign invasion, that's what seems to me to be the just option, as opposed to a very large country attacking a small country with a fair few Catholics in, actually. I don't profess that to be the only point of view or the only right point of view, but it's the one that seems to be, for me, the most correct one.
So, Frankie, what do you know about the let's call it the religious footprint of the Ukraine? Because I mean, they're Eastern Orthodox, right? And there's a certain amount of Catholics as well.
Yeah. So in Ukraine, it's the center of what's called the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, which, of course, it's been affected by the council, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, right? But historically, it's been the biggest of the Eastern Catholic churches. About 500 years ago, at something called the Union of Brest, I think it was when it was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, but I might be wrong there. They reunited with Rome. And ever since, in the western part of Ukraine in particular, there's been a large amount of Catholics, such that in a fair few parts of Western Ukraine, the majority of the population are Catholics. When Ukraine was part of the USSR, communists infiltrated the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and voted in a false synod, as it were, to integrate it with the Greek schismatics in Russia. So it's a church that's always been repressed by the Orthodox, especially in times of the Soviet Union. So I don't think that Russia would repress the Greek Catholic Church now, because there would be outcry among the rest of the West, even more so than there is now. And it doesn't seem to me to be on the top of their agenda, but it's certainly something to be aware of given Russia's track record, I think.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So give me your thoughts. This is going to be kind of a high bar to hit. Frankie's got it pretty well dialed in here. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say is I don't think it's stopping with the Ukraine. I think it's step one. It's just kind of setting the stage, and here we are. This is what we're going to do, and they have a history of being kind of a bully in the area, and I think Putin, going back to his KGB days, does harbor a lot of that Soviet thinking. And also, what's not clear is what's really driving it. Is it to continue to spread communism? Who's pulling the strings, and who's all involved? It's not just Russia.
Right. It's a complicated, and Russia is a particularly complicated situation in general. And I know that, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Alexander Krysov, who's he's a priest in Moscow, and actually kind of he knows some of the higher ups, and he knows Mikhail Gorbachev, and I mean he's familiar with politics there, and we've had him for dinner a couple times, and he's talked about the situation there. And is very, one of the things that really he said that stuck out to me was that in Russia you had 2 or 3 generations. Anti-Christian, anti-Catholic communism was basically enforced, and it was enforced through schools. And so because you were to send children to school in the public schools there, and they would basically, teachers would ask children to raise their hand if they knew of any Christian activity going on in their household. And when the children raised their hand, of course, then it was on the state to go in and deal with it, right? And they dealt with it the way they dealt with it. And over the course of time, what left was after those several generations, and this maybe was from the 60s through the 80s and 90s, that you had basically, you were dead spiritually. I mean, from a Catholic Christian point of view, there was really nothing left of the faith. And so they started, I think, now enter Putin. Putin, I think, has kind of created, and Frankie, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Putin's kind of created this state-run Russian Orthodox Church that really kind of runs according to his willingness. And one of the other things that Putin will do at times is he'll make a display of Christianity. He'll hold the Bible. He'll make Christian commentary or whatever. And the belief is that basically he has hatred for he's quiet about it, but he has a hatred for the West that goes back to his KGB days, goes back to the old USSR days. And what he's doing when he's pretending to be Christian, or openly Christian, he's basically trying to play on the sympathies of the West, right? So he didn't do it much under Trump, but he certainly did it under Obama, and I don't know about recently with Biden, but he will put on a bit of a Christian act in order to turn the Western people against their less Christian leaders. And so it's all political. It's all political for him. So I really think that
same thing with Joe Biden, right?
Yeah.
Play a Catholic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't even know to what extent he plays a Catholic, but
I think that's definitely the case. I think with Putin, it's really about, especially in the past 20 years or so, when he really had to rebuild Russia, more or less, from the great decline of the 90s. He wanted to create a sense of Russian identity. And the nature of, the nature of the Orthodox Church or churches is such that, well, there's a national church for more or less each country. And when you're basically trying to give some kind of pride back to a completely dejected people, religion is one of the ways to do it in general. So when you have a Russian church for Russian people, that's a way he created a Russian identity. So he's always been very close with the Russian Orthodox Church, but that's not come along. It's not been accompanied by a revival in religious practice. A lot more Russians go to church and things like that. Obviously, it's schismatic, but that's aside from the point. Abortion rates in Russia are sky high. 2/3 of HIV cases in Europe are in Russia. They're not the socially conservative paradise we see, we think of when people talk of Russia. And Ukraine isn't a decadent place either in comparison. We can't phrase this as like an invasion to save Ukraine, because I mean, sodomite marriage is banned constitutionally in Ukraine as well. I'm not by this, trying to say that, they're terrible in Russia, because compared to us, it's true they aren't. But I certainly agree with you, Dan, when you say it's a war of minds. And we see that in the past week or so more than ever. It's a battle between two different narratives that's trying to kind of capture the minds of people here, but neither one particularly shows the full truth of the situation.
Right. So Frankie, I'm going to move on to a little different topic here. That's you brought up, and it's been very much on a lot of people's minds. And when we first brought this subject up, you said, "Hey, there's a Fatima." Our Lady family plays into this whole thing, and obviously with Russia, we know there's a component there. There is a great deal of talk this week in terms of Fatima and just our renewed interest in it. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about talk to us about where you see Fatima fitting the whole thing?
Yeah, so Sister Lucia, in her last public interview, was in 1957, which is more or less, the calm before the storm in terms of timeline of history, right? And she said that if Russia is not converted, she will be the country chosen by God to castigate, to punish the world. And I think that initially we saw that with the spread of communist ideals, because as a young person, I can tell you a large portion of young people in the West, both in the UK and in the USA, are influenced by communist ideals to a greater or lesser extent, or liberal ideas or otherwise. So I think that was the first part, because it destroyed the West from within in terms of the natural goodness of the population, sodomy and things like that. And now Russia is punishing the world. God is punishing the world through Russia in terms of war. This was most poignant within the 20th century, but it's not gone away. Things didn't just go well again when Russia ceased to be officially communist. As one of you said, communism was taught to the Russian people for decades. It doesn't just go away like that. Many of them express idealism regarding the USSR. And basically, I mean, I'm not a massive fanatic regarding private revelations, but I think that it's almost undeniable that what's going on in the world right now ties very strongly with Fatima, because Our Lady of Fatima appeared in front of those children in Portugal to tell the world to do penance. And it's precisely because we didn't do that we've been deprived of authority in the church for so long, that Russia is punishing God is punishing the world through Russia. And the lack of holiness and penance is probably the reason we've been without a pope for so long still now. So yeah, I think the general message is God is using Russia to punish the world for its sins. It's been doing so. God's been doing so for the past 100 years, and we deserve it.
Yeah, Boyd, you talked about this being a part of a bigger picture, and I mean, and Frankie really lays out a bigger picture brilliantly here. I think. What are your thoughts on what is the bigger picture here?
Well, so the bigger picture, and you kind of see the same blueprint, with kind of the spread of communism or whatever facade it's running under now through Russia, where they kind of quietly infiltrate, get established, and then, next thing you know, that the communist ideals, as Frankie said, are in the West, and you never would have believed that 50, 60 years ago. It would have been almost unthinkable, but it's everywhere now. And that blueprint was used to infiltrate the church. They got their people in quietly and sat there for years, and then boom, they kind of all activated, and next thing you know, we have John the 23rd and the Second Vatican Council and all this stuff that you see everywhere, that same blueprint used to kind of take over. It happens and you don't even know it. it's happened, and we're sitting here thinking life is normal. Then all of a sudden, it's not, and you're thinking the church is normal, and all of a sudden, it wasn't. You know, you have people like Bergoglio.
That's definitely something that's so true, because the whole of Europe kind of woke up 2 days ago to having war on the European continent that we've not had since World War II. The atmosphere, because I see it in the UK, it just kind of changed overnight. Because, I mean, you had the war in the Balkans, but that was kind of skirmishes over a couple of years. We've not had an invasion of one country by another in Europe since 1939. It was really shocking, to be honest.
Yeah, you have these quiet times, and everybody gets kind of lackadaisical about things and not paying attention. And next thing you know, it kind of slaps you across the face, and you're like, "Whoa, we got to do something." Well, now you're fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Right. So, Eric, you talked a little bit about, I think, crossing a line, basically, that we crossed a line into some of those lines. And I guess my question to you would be, where do you think we are in the fulfillment of our Blessed Mother saying that read her errors throughout the world? Is that something that happened long ago? Is it something that's ongoing? Is it something that's future? Where do you think we are with that?
I mean, my opinion is that, it's prophecy fulfilled, and honestly has been fulfilled for, the past 50 years. Obviously spreading her errors is not a, force thing. It's not Russia will take over the world and oppress everyone. It's Russia will spread her errors, which are atheistic communism, throughout the world. And I think that's pretty much been done. To add a little bit, maybe tie it together, spreading her errors using what was the Catholic Church. You know what I mean? Like that atheistic communism is very much related to modernism in a lot of their same, ideals. And so I'm surprised, or maybe I'm not surprised, that Our Lady didn't actually predict that. Like Russia would spread her errors throughout the world, but even use the facade of the Catholic Church as the way to do that. So for me, it's prophecy fulfilled.
I mean, I think
Frankie, I was going to kick the
Yeah. I just think perhaps Our Lady did one about that, but it was never released. With a third secret.
Right.
Sure.
Maybe I'm just speculating here.
You mean you don't believe the third secret they released was the actual third secret?
I don't think anyone with two eyes does, to be honest. The rise of modernism and communism are so closely linked, because modernism brings with it an eventual loss of faith, because the whole structure of the church and the Catholic religion is built upon unchanging truth from 33 AD to 2022. And when you relativize truth, and when you read a so-called papal document and you see something that could be said by a Catholic and then something that could be said by an atheist, you confuse people, and it brings a loss in faith. There was a Catholic primary school or elementary school near to where I grew up, and I went to high school with a lot of people from there. I don't know a single Catholic from there now, not one. And that's really common everywhere in the world. And so I think everyone knows or has heard of somewhere the story of Bella Dodd, who was a communist that converted to Catholicism. And she's basically said, we put men in the seminaries. And that had been going on since even before communists had taken over Russia, with the modernists during the time of St. Pius X and before that. There had been modernists and later on atheists put in by communists, put in through the seminaries. They waited there, bided their time, and then they were there in the structures of the church, and their purpose has been to destroy the church, or as much as it could be, because of course the church can never be destroyed. But that was their goal, right? And that goal happens to very happily coincide with that of the communists. So I think it's very clearly linked together. And I think that it's probable that Our Lady Fatima warned about this, but it wasn't released by John the 23rd because, well, it probably would have exposed everything that he wanted to do.
Right. Well, let me throw this question out because this is spec out there a little bit, and I'm not even sure exactly what to think about it myself, but I think it's an interesting discussion point. So what about the possibility that we are now living in a post-Fatima period? So our Blessed Mother warned us that if we don't heed her words, that Russia would spread her out the world, and that's happened. She allegedly, potentially, possibly warned Pope John the 23rd that if he called the council, that to apostasy within the church, okay, and that's happened. So basically, our Blessed Mother wanted us to turn our hearts to her Son, and we didn't do it. And she gave us a couple of or else's, and the or else's have played themselves out. Question point: what more? I mean, where do we go from here? Do we have any idea where we go from here? I mean, it feels like some kind of judgment is not. I mean, certainly, I don't think we just pick up and say, "Oops, sorry, let's get back to the church again." It feels like we do have some kind of judgment nigh, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, there were two other prophecies, right? That Russia would be converted, and that in the end her Immaculate Heart will triumph. My opinion is that neither of those have happened, so I would say we're still sort of in the middle of her prophecy. But that's just me.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
that's a good point.
definitely in agreement. Our Lady of Fatima also says what I mentioned right at the start. Russia will be converted eventually, and when we get a true pope again, I believe that that's a when, not an if. Because only other time would be if we were at the end of time, right? And the Jews haven't converted yet. I think that when we get a true pope again, he will consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and she will be converted, and we will have a time of peace. Every day, it seems like we're getting kind of closer and closer to the end. I mean, you walk down the street of any major city and you think, how has this happened? It's often good in those times to remember that if you hadn't been given the grace you'd be worse than that.
Right.
But in any case, I think that it's when the moment comes that we feel as if everything is hopeless, that the restoration will come, both in the church and in the world. I mean, at the moment, the president of Ukraine and Russia could sit down right now and talk things out, and it could be stopped. The situation's not hopeless; it's just bad. And even in the church, you see some signs of more people converting, and some conservative cardinals who maybe could get a little bit of courage and do something. I don't know. I'm just kind of talking possibilities here, but point is, hope's not lost entirely, right? When that hope is gone, that's when Our Lady will intervene and through her intercession obtain a recovery of authority in the church and peace in the world. So I think, although it seems every day like a judgment is nigh, it's not coming yet. It's not coming yet.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm old enough to actually remember, 20 years ago, the state of the church, and the state of the church now is so much better than it was 20 years ago. We have probably 5x the number of true priests, at least in this country. Mm-hmm. Times more parishioners, more people. There were times, back in the 80s, 90s, and that's before I remember, but where a priest would have a parish of 10 people, and that would be a good day, So I think, from that perspective, just to add on to your point, Frankie, I think if anything, the situation in the church, that is the true church, is actually better than it has been.
And
it is
being
absolutely.
here in Omaha, we kind of get a unique view of that because, seminary and everything here. But I remember, 17, 18 years ago when we first started coming here, and there were a handful of sisters and a handful of seminarians, and, we had 2 masses, but the 8 o'clock was nearly empty, and the 10 o'clock was not quite full. And now, they're both full. We have so many seminarians that they're split up, and sisters 36 or something like that. So I think, that if you need affirmation or something to help strengthen your faith, just seeing that growth. And
Right.
now we've got so many more priests, and you're right, people are converting, and young people. I remember when we first started coming, my wife's grandma came, and she's like, "Oh, this is so wonderful. It's like when I was young." And I that kind of makes you think, the older people would be the ones more prone, but see so many young people, and I think that's got to be edifying to everybody.
Yeah.
There is hope. And,
I think
grow.
that's
Yeah.
I think that's also an indication of the way that the Holy Ghost tends to move people. I mean, I'm no priest here, but when you look at what happened at Sodom and Gomorrah, for example, God seemed to wait until there was literally not one person worth a dime in terms of their morals before he intervened with thunder and lightning. But it seems that in the church, go back to like the 70s or something, and things seem like the rock bottom. But God has been moving hearts and minds bit by bit, and starts off as, oh, there's 2 extra seminarians than we might have compared to normal, and then bit by bit God's been working through men to build up the church. So I think that's also an indication of it's not the end of the world just yet. Man has a little bit of fight left in him yet.
So
Yeah.
this is a little off topic, but go ahead.
No, go ahead, Aaron.
Oh, just a little off topic, but I would like to get everyone on this call's opinions of, when we do get a true pope, what that looks like. Because I know that can be an interesting, and it's all
Do you mean
philosophical.
how it happens or when it will happen?
Both.
Ooh, I tend to be on the more optimistic side by nature. That's just how I am. I think that within our lifetimes, probably. Thing is, things seem to move very slowly years ago, but in the past 3 years, I mean, if you went back to 2019 and told everyone of what was going to happen from the pandemic to Traditionis Custodes to Russia invading Ukraine, you would have thought they were mad. So I really see maybe within the next 20 years, and that might be like, wow, but it only takes one day or one instant for God to convert someone through his grace, and all it has to be is the right person. In terms of how, well, there are a myriad of possibilities. It could be that.
Yeah, and this is just speculation. Like, what do you? Your opinion?
Exactly.
Speculation. It could be that, like, I don't know, Francis goes out this very second and says, "I'm burning the documents of the council," and then like he calls like a big council and invites all a few bishops and things like that, and then we just move on and start to rebuild the church. Or maybe it happens that a cardinal comes and he realizes the errors of his ways, and he says, "You're a phony. There's no way you're a true pope." And then we start to legally declare the see vacant and call a council or a conclave or whatever would logically proceed from that. Yeah, I mean, I think there are signs of hope in terms of more and more the seminarians joining the Novus Ordo are more conservative. That's not, me saying go join the Novus Ordo and work from within. It's just not possible.
Because you're not actually, ordained.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just not something a Catholic can do. But God always draws good out of evil. And I think, whether it's Francis converting or a bishop or a cardinal, I think that the problem came from Rome and the solution will come from Rome. I think that really is indispensable in terms of the visibility of the church as well, because when people see Rome, they think of the Catholic Church. We can't have a Pope Michael situation plus a few sedevacantis bishops. Just having holy orders alone is not, it's not enough to call an imperfect general council. Theologians always said that required a jurisdiction, which is not something our bishops have. So I think the solution will come from Rome when it happens, because you require jurisdiction to have an imperfect general council. Without that, it would just be a group of guys meeting and talking about something. I mean, so-called Pope Michael invited all the Sede bishops. That just can't happen. I think the solution pretty much has to come from Rome. But as to how it happens exactly, it could be anything.
Yeah. The one ad that I would put here, and this our son Dominic talks about this a lot, that as of right now, mankind is still basically we're right our comforts, we're riding high with our modernist theology, with our gay rights parades, with all these different things. We have not been humbled, and until we are physically humbled, and whether that means hunger and starvation, whether it means a dark what it means, I'm not exactly sure. But at some point, I think we have to come to God on our knees and say, please get us out of this, because as mankind, we're not there. As a church, I think we're getting better. We're moving in that direction. But I think in kind we're near, and that's I think definitely a prerequisite to any formal action in Rome.
Yeah, definitely. I think the School of Salamanca was a group of theologians about 500 years ago in Salamanca in Spain, and they did a big thought experiment about the invasion of the Americas on the part of Spain and Portugal, and think, under what reasons could it be justified? One of those reasons was where there would be a sufficient number of Christians to want a Christian government from the Pope. And it just occurred to me that when there are enough Catholics that are actively praying for and doing penance for and truly wanting, not just saying they want, but really wanting an authority in the church, that's when God will give it to them. Because the people of today, and this even includes sedevacantists and traditionalists of all kinds, they don't really want an authority or want anyone to obey, even if they say they do. When we have more properly the virtue of obedience, the world over, not just in traditionalist circles, but the world over, that's when God in his grace will give us an authority whom we can and will obey.
Right. So let me change the subject again a little bit on you guys. I know that maybe Frankie will start here, because you're closer to the front lines of this war in the Ukraine, and I hear a good amount of out there people worried that it's going to escalate, worried that perhaps it comes to America, or Putin's going to bomb America, or whatever it is. What do we tell Catholics right now in order to maintain, importantly, our spiritual, our supernatural sense of hope, but I mean to the extent that we can, our natural hope?
Yeah, so in terms of spiritual hope, we just have to remember that everything that happens in the world, God either wants or permits. I saw something earlier when one of the popes suppressed the Jesuits, and St. Alphonsus was, terribly upset and distraught about it. But he said the will of the Pope is the will of God. And so similarly, we have to say, whenever something happens, it's the will of God. So let me embrace it and be as good a Catholic as I can in accordance with that. In terms of natural hope and what's going on, the way it would escalate, I suppose, is if Russia attacked another country or that was part of NATO. That could be the Baltic countries like Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, or if there was some problem in the sea near Turkey. I see that likelihood as low, but possible. But the knowledge that none of us here are in a position to do anything about it is, should be comforting enough. All we can do is just be as good Catholics as we can according to our state in life. And nothing we do can change things. But I think it's probable that whatever's going on now is significant and will have some kind of effects in our lives in terms of, if not a big war, which I'm not saying will happen, but maybe just in terms of the state of governments in general or in the church and things like that. I think what's going on now is significant, but nothing so far. I mean, I still wake up and go about my work, go about my day, go to work, and pray as I ought to, and nothing's changed for us so far. So we just kind of have to carry on and not try and check the news every 2 seconds.
Right. So Eric, what would you say if I'm a Catholic and I'm worried and I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring? What are you telling me?
Well, I go back to this a lot. I think Kevin and I talked about it on one of the podcasts, which is, why are we so worried about the state of the world? I think trads have this, I don't know what to call it, but like a desire to be living in the end times, like almost kind of like there's a word that I can use, but it's not appropriate probably. But like they like the fact that it's the end times. They like being the underdog. They like being persecuted and everything. And I was like pointing to, you know, the end of our world, except Frankie's, is going to be in the next 40, 50 years anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
The end of our world is when we die. So if we're ready for that, and if we're living as though we're ready for that, who cares what's going on in the world? And I say that not like who cares, we shouldn't even like watch the news at all or not care or not do our best to make it a better place. But, you know, it shouldn't be all encompassing. It shouldn't be everything that we can think about. It shouldn't affect our day-to-day lives. I try to live that way, and you know, it's not easy. It's easier said than done.
Right. Oh, exactly. Boyd, you have 12 children, and obviously, I mean, imagine this has to come up with as a matter of conversation in your household. And what do you tell them when the children ask you what's going on in the world? How do you give them hope?
Well, so we've got kind of a couple of tools at our disposal. One, we're the church militant, so we have a weapon, and that weapon is our rosary. That's the most powerful weapon that we have, and praying that and praying it well. And sometimes something that I struggle with is daily, putting it off to the end of the day, as the bishop has said many times, is not ideal. But we just have to consistently pray and pray well. Just keep ourselves in a state of grace. Frequent confession, because whether the end of the world's tomorrow or 30 years, it doesn't matter if you're not in a state of grace. And then, our kind of defense, our brown scapular, keep it on. The scapular and the rosary should also keep us mindful of how we live. And if we're living our best Catholic life, not to say that the war with Russia and the Ukraine doesn't matter, but in a way it doesn't matter. What matters is that we live our life in such a way that we get to heaven. So, if you approach things that way and are living that way, nothing else matters.
Right. One of the things we would pick up with our children or our younger children, and when they would see, they talk to friends or whatever, and they'd hear about news events or whatnot, the news would get a little sketchy. And, looking at the broader context, we would tell them something. I hate to tell you this, but mankind is in need of a spanking. And, perhaps we'll have a good cry, and then we'll get our act together again. And so, that's the kind of thing that it kind of resonated with them anyways. So, all right, well, let's move on. We've got another topic to discuss here. We wanted to talk about the FSSP, the Society of St. Peter, and they're having been granted this week the 1962 missal by Pope Francis. I guess by a quick show of hands for all of us, how many of us think that Bergoglio is up to something nefarious here? I mean, I know. Yeah, I think we were a perfect 4 for 4 on that. And I know that, Boyd, you talked about how that this was a particular area of interest for you. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off? What is going on?
Well, so, he made this declaration suspending the extraordinary form, as they call it. And in doing so, I think there are a lot of conservative or traditional leaning Novus Ordo modern Catholics. And I think that got a lot of them thinking, something's not right here, maybe we should look. And I think that a lot of them said, the only way is sedevacantism. and it's losing those people. It's losing a revenue stream for them. They're given their tithing and whatever, and it's like, we got to stop the flow and throw them a nugget, and see, we're not so bad. We're still keeping it for you if you can go to the FSSP, and it's all a smoke screen. It's just giving them that little nugget, and I think he's going to have a lot to answer for doing that, because how many souls did he keep from being saved by going
it's incalculable. I honestly, and I'm just going to cut in for just a second here. I honestly go through my mental Rolodex and ask myself the question: is there a soul on Earth in the history of mankind? Is there a soul more responsible for the loss of more souls than George Bergoglio? And I'm not sure. I mean, maybe a couple of the other anti-popes, I suppose.
Benedict,
but
I think it's close.
I would say
yeah,
Paul VI,
because okay. And
if he kept his Catholic sense about him, he could have reversed everything. And because by the time John the 23rd died, not much had happened. I think Paul VI was really the one that started it all. Without him, there's no Francis.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Francis is he's actually overseeing the harvest. I think it was really, I think you're right. Paul VI was the one who sowed the seeds. Well, although I guess that was John the 23rd who actually sowed the seeds. But,
I think.
Go ahead, Frank.
I just said, I think there was some Italian woman at a cone. They called Paul VI the monster in Italian, because there was an Italian woman in a bookshop that they were at, and she saw his face and she called him the monster, because he was there for a while, from 63 until about 78 or so, maybe 79. It's a lot of destruction he did in a lot of time. Cut to the year maybe like 1976, and the society had just been suppressed. People probably felt like there was no hope in the world, because sedevacantism was slowly just starting to be a thing. So yeah, you can't even imagine what it would have been like to live through those times as an adult Catholic. So yeah, by far, Paul VI, he destroyed the church as much as he could, as much as could be done, and now he just kind of like put all the money there, and Francis is inheriting it now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, good point. So Eric, starting here.
Sure.
What are your thoughts?
So the motu proprio. So one of the, I guess, what's like nefarious and in a bad way brilliant moves, I think, in the entire history of the Novus Ordo was Ratzinger's motu proprio in 2007. Right? I mean, allowing a valid mass only after, and like literally probably to the year after effectively all priests were no longer validly ordained, is just such a master stroke of deception. It affects me personally. I have a lot of extended family who, well-meaning, well-intentioned, good Catholics are trying to be, who go to the fraternity, and it's frustrating because it looks exactly the same and it feels exactly the same. Their priests are just as conservative as ours when they're preaching from the pulpit. And it's a depressing, sad thing. And it's, not putting Benedict the 16th as, up there necessarily with Paul VI and Bergoglio, but that was a masterstroke.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
To
the point, go ahead, Blake.
Well, so I was just going to bring up, kind of what got me thinking about what I'd said was, so you have Taylor Marshall, who's he's kind of an influencer on social media,
right?
Big following, and so Bergoglio said no more traditional mats, and that got him publicly speaking that this is a heretical, and all this, and you could see kind of his wheels turning that maybe something's not right here, and then shortly thereafter, before he got enough steam to go all the way down the path, then but at FSSP, they can do it. And then, so it's like you see people like that with a big following that might take a lot of people with them. We got to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
Give them something.
Regarding Taylor Marshall, I can say I've sources that are close to him. I personally think eventually he'll get there, because I mean, you have to think back to some of the greats like Bishop Sanborn or the late Father Chikada. They were in society for like more than 10 years or so, or maybe like 10 years or however many. If they took that long, I think we can cut Taylor Marshall some slack.
For being a layman, yeah,
right. No one got there overnight, right? Everyone took the society step, or at least the most did. I know that when he released that video, he was quite distressed because a lot of people, he has a big following. A lot of people were kind of hammering him, big people as well, going to see him and things like that. I think he will get there though. Regarding the fraternity in general, it has to be said of the lay adherents that they're of goodwill. We have to assume that until proven otherwise, right? Because I know I went to the indoor for a few months when I was in the Novus Ordo. A gorgeous liturgy, externally speaking. But the people there they've seen what's gone on in the Novus Ordo and they're trying to escape it the best way they know how. And we have to try and do the best that we can to convince them of the errors of the council and the conclusions we have to draw. But they have to be said to be of goodwill. I think the real deception comes in terms of the clergy, who will maybe even privately tell people not to go to the new mass, but then publicly say it's okay by virtue of their very membership in those groups.
My experience with these people, my relatives, well-meaning relatives, when you say Novus Ordo, they agree with you. Like they hate the Novus Ordo as much as we do. Right? They despise is the wrong word, but disagree with Francis as much as we do. And yet they just literally, it's just that step of he's not the Pope that is understandably hard to get over.
Yeah, right.
Definitely.
Right. And this just, go ahead, Frank.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying that these people, when the restoration of authority comes in the church, they will rejoice along with us, and they will probably be like, "You are right." But
not that that's what we want.
The priests.
Wouldn't hurt. So back to a point that Boyd had made, and this is a little story that I have, and a private conversation with a priest, and it was not meant to be necessarily private, but I'll keep his name. It's a name that you would recognize. I'll just put it that way. But about sedevacantism and the footprint that we have in the world right now, and in the Catholic world, and somebody said to him, I forget why would we do so and so, because nobody even knows who we are, and this priest looked back at Boyd and he says, "Oh, trust me, they know who we are," and so I think that to a certain extent there is this public not even just trying to pretend that we don't exist. And I think it's interesting to go back to what you had said, Boyd, that perhaps France and these people are actually behind the scenes seeing sedevacantism starting to pick up traction, starting to get more popular. And actually, I know on Twitter, Frankie and I are both on Twitter, as are you, Boyd, and we're seeing new converts almost every. So I guess the question I would put out there is what's your sense in terms of our footprint now, and in terms of the impact going forward into the future? Where do you think our next couple of years are looking? And Boyd, let's start with you. Well,
I'll just, not to that point exactly, but we've got to be careful with our footprint on Twitter,
right?
Because people do know we're there, and they see us on Twitter. And lately there's been a lot of, so there's always been groups disagreeing in the church. It's throughout history, but kind of had the luxury before of, one, having a pope, and two, the church was big, and there were ways to resolve that. And now we don't have the pope, and we're few, and us few need to unite and be an example, so that those people that are watching, that do know we're there, and they're kind of sitting on the fence, and they know something's not right with the pope, but they look at us sometimes and see our bickering, and yeah, maybe that's not right either. I mean,
yeah, and this is something that
debates are fine.
Frankie and I, right. Well, and that's where Frankie and I can kind of point fingers at each other, right? Because we've kind of gone back and forth, and I think that what we've tried to do, even when we disagree, is to try to keep the conversation cordial, try to keep it theological, try to keep it, basically in a context of Catholic charity. And I know for me, it's an interesting thing, and Frankie, I really like to get your thoughts on this as well. I know for me, when you see these theological, and basically we all know that if you've been following it all, that the major theological debate right now is between the Catholicism thesis of Gerard de Laurier versus the totalist position in terms of the papacy. How do we restore the papacy and whatnot? And Frankie, you referred to it a little bit earlier. For me, I see both sides. Okay, so on one hand, I do see that there's that these discussions can get long and drawn out, and they go back and forth, and they don't really get necessarily personal, but they do get a little bit, they get hot sometimes, and that drives people away. But at the same time, say, there are people, I think, in the Novus Ordo, there are people on the fence, there are people that are disenchanted with their faith, who are seeing legitimate logical discussion happening. That doesn't happen anywhere else. It doesn't happen in the SSPX, really. It doesn't happen in FSS sort of anywhere else. It happens with a set of content. If there's a downside, I think, to the bickering, and you're right. I mean, it gets a little annoying sometimes. I do think is that having these discussions out in public and having them, prayerfully, having them charitably, can have good impact as well. And I want to get your Frankie.
Yeah, so I think that, it's pretty well known publicly in terms of my adherence to the thesis. I often think of and this comparison's been drawn by others before, of the discussion, to put it lightly, between the Jesuits and Dominicans on the doctrine of grace and how we reconcile predestination and free will. Very complex topic, and it got more heated than you might believe. One side accused the other of being like Pelagians, which were early church heretics, and the other accused the other side of being like Lutherans. So we're not there just yet. It's important to always retain charity in what we're saying, but these are very important things which have to be discussed. I know many people, including myself, that would never have became or remained sedevacantists without the thesis, because we become sedevacantists because of the apostolicity of the faith. The faith in the church has to remain the same. That man, whoever he is on the See of Peter, is not preserving the faith. Therefore, there's no way he could be the authority of Christ. Equally important is the apostolicity of succession, a line of legitimate successors. And Cajetan said the church must always either have a pope or have the power of electing one. The church is a perfect society and must always be able to provide for herself. And the problems people come with to sedevacantism is, okay, where is it? And why hasn't the church used it for 60 years? These are big problems. And I think that, without getting into it here, discussions about this topic are the occasion for getting good answers for them. In the same way that whenever the church has defined an issue dogmatically, either through a council or through the Pope ex cathedra, is when a lot of heretics are denying a dogma. It's when Protestantism came around that the Council of Trent responded. So when we have a lot of these discussions, it becomes the occasion for each side to be able to flesh out what they think a bit better, and thereby provide good answers to people coming from the Novus Ordo saying, well, I like what you're saying, but where is jurisdiction in the church today? Where is the power of election in the church today?
Right. Exactly.
Can I just take a moment to clarify what I was saying? I don't have a problem with the discussions. They're good.
Right.
People learn that way. It's just how some
Tone.
how some
right.
speak to one another during it. It doesn't. We should be good Catholic examples when we're doing it. And I've even seen some of the clergy not be that way. And we're all human, and it's hard sometimes to keep the emotion out. But if we're going to be doing it in that public way, we need to keep that top of mind when we're doing it.
Well, and adding a little bit to your point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
What disturbs me is seeing lay people accuse priests and bishops, validly ordained, who have been through a lot more theology than we have. That disturbs me a little bit. But a legitimate discussion, a respectful discussion, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of a plug in here that recently Bishop Sanborn came on to Kevin's show and did. It's actually gotten a lot of views, and it was. I thought it was a beautiful handling of the situation, because Kevin asked wonderful questions, and Bishop Sanborn beautifully laid out the thesis. And I think, and Frankie, I mean, I have to tell you that there were people, and I know them personally, who very much, completely totalist, that didn't think much of the thesis. When they heard Bishop Sanborn lay it out like he did, it was those things that didn't necessarily convert people over, but it made them think, wow, there is definitely scholarship. There is definitely, some serious Catholic principles behind this whole mode of thought. And let's not just let it go lightly.
Yeah. I mean, the other day I had spoken to someone on Twitter for a bit about the thesis, and we agreed we'd have a call on a little social media platform called Discord, and we spoke for maybe an hour and a bit. At the end of the call, I remained an adherent of the thesis and he remained a totalist. But what we did do is understand what we thought a bit better, and no hard feelings at the end of the day. I think that, as I say, without the intervention of authority, there's always going to be discussions. And when there is authority restored in the church, the Pope will confirm or deny the validity of the thesis or of the totalist thesis. What we just have to make sure that if there is a restoration of authority in the church, we don't become so attached to what we think that we become schismatics and just like a little sect. Be it in Spokane or in Brooksville, as long as authorities are restored in the church in accordance with Catholic principles, like it's not just me walking into St. Peter's and saying I'm the Pope now. As long as it happens, I think God will make it clear to everyone. But as long as charity is maintained in discussions and we don't become too sectarian in terms of laity, because obviously priests aren't always going to be able to cooperate, but as long as we're not out here excommunicating people, we can have a good discussion about things.
Yep. Right. And to add to that a little bit, totalists shouldn't be trying to convert, holders of the thesis. Holders of the thesis shouldn't be trying to convert totalists. It's not a matter of faith. And the thesis is exactly that. It's a thesis. It's an explanation for the situation that we're in. And so keeping that in mind, like as long as you are sede vacantist and you're not, a modernist under the FSSP or a self-proclaimed schismatic under the Society of Pius X, that's the important thing. And these discussions, it fascinates me because I think if I had to pick a side, I'm probably on the totalist side, but I completely understand and, understand why the thesis is held like it is. And, I think it's a valid way to explain the situation.
Yeah, exactly. The hard question to a totalist, and this is one that they've given thought to and put the question out there and whatnot, is let's go ahead and play out the scenario. Let's say one of his successors and says, I hereby convert, we're burning the Vatican II, all the documents we're returning to, that we're going to reconsecrate or reordain all of our priests according to the pre-1968 right? And all this goes on. Now, from a strictly totalist point of view, Okay, this is valid because there is literally there's no authority that can allow or that can accept the Pope back into the church. But I look at this in a practical sense, and I say, okay, if this were to happen, would I be the one? Nah, it's not valid because it's not legal. Because I'm a totalist. I absolutely
Probably not.
wouldn't. Now I would think no, and I would follow my bishops. I mean, that's I'm not making that decision myself. I'm Bishop Pivarunas, basically. But at the same time, I do. I mean, that to me lends a little bit of credibility to the thesis. If that one were to play out, that I think is absolutely a possibility that a conversion of the Pope is one of the ways this whole thing could play out.
There is a theologian. The thesis kind of abstracts from the whole issue of a heretical pope topic, which the reason for which I'll give in a moment. But even the theologians that do talk about this, Cardinal Albano is a famous one. He spoke about it maybe 500 years ago, and he was cited in a work in the 1800s. He said that if a heretical pope had lost office, he, by the very fact of his conversion, as long as it was before a legal declaration of the loss of his office, he would regain the papacy by that very fact. Because, well, I think regarding the heretical pope issue in general, it was kind of conceived of by theologians supposing a Catholic hierarchy that would kind of sort this out. And it's also not just the situation we have. It's not just that Francis is in Rome, saying heretical things. He's imposing a new religion upon the church. And that's been going on for 50, 60 years. So it's really an issue of indefectibility. And that's why, sedevacantism is really important. It's not just an opinion of what to do with the heretical pope, because there were both sides. It wasn't just St. Bellarmine. It was also John of St. Thomas. So it's not just that. The faith is at stake, because we can't say that from a legitimate authority is proceeding heresies and bad liturgies and bad disciplines and things like that.
Because in that case, you're denying the Catholic doctrine of indefectibility.
Exactly. And I think that people in society, they give a response to this. It's not satisfactory. I think, they're trying, but it's not satisfactory. And we have to go with what the faith says. And that leads to sedevacantism in general. But if we're talking about the heretical pope issue anyway, there are theologians that say, okay, if he loses the faith and loses his office, if he comes back to it, he would recuperate that office by that very fact of his conversion. And I certainly agree with you, Dan. I think that realistically, if, think of St. Paul. He became an apostle and he was, a great persecutor of the church. If we had a St. Paul moment, by the grace of God, and Francis came out tomorrow, burned the documents of the council in St. Peter's Square, and invited all of the bishops to Rome to, let's start sorting things out. You almost wouldn't believe it for a couple of days. But I think that as you started to, rub your eyes a bit and realize it was actually happening, I think we'd kind of, start to go along with what was happening. Because what we really wouldn't want to see is authority has been restored in the church as normal and has been for like 100 years, but there are a small group of people or schismatics in a certain part of the world, be it Europe or America or wherever, that are just kind of carrying on, like Japan,
I think there's a couple of comments that we might want to address
here.
Yeah,
let's go ahead and throw this question out. Yep, Hop Shizzle asking, but does that apply to a heretic pope who was never validly ordained? That's a common question and concern for the thesis, Frankie. What's your thought there?
Yeah, so Bishop Zambo may have addressed this in his podcast with Kevin. I can't remember exactly, but Pope Pius XII in 1953, he was giving an allocution, a speech to the World Congress of the Lay Apostolate. And basically, he was speaking on the issue of what happens if a layman was elected to the papacy. And he said that as long as he accepted to be consecrated a bishop, he would accept the office and he would have jurisdiction from the moment of accepting it, not from the moment of ordination. Think back to St. Ambrose, who was, whilst a catechumen, designated to the bishopric of Milan, I think it was. So if Francis converted, as long as he said, let's conditionally consecrate me and ordain me, just in case, and we'll talk about the ordination stuff a little bit later on. that would be fine. And he would have authority even before he said that.
Right. Very good. So we'll kind of wrap things up here, and I wanted to just put a little perspective. This is to build on a point that Eric was making earlier. I hope my connection, but
we can hear you so far.
Okay, good. So when I look back at generations, so Eric says you say, I'm old enough to, and I hate to tell you that Eric beat on this one. I'm old enough to remember when a generation ago. So your generation was one that basically grew up. It was kind of transformative in terms of taking what was a very rudimentary growing church and build it into something more viable. That was kind of a turning point. But I look back. Okay, so my father-in-law, Chuck Chenoweth, God rest his soul, he basically was one of the pioneers, and his conversion story. He was literally in mass one day in the state in Virginia, and the priest went and said something about how the warning Jesus died for you, and went on his Protestant talk. He got the family up, walked them out of church, started looking around, and he eventually, I think a few months later, he put his children and the whole family in a Volkswagen station wagon, drove across country, Colorado, where they taken up residence, and basically set down stakes there with no job, and basically to live for the faith. I mean, he was a true pioneer. Another generation later was really my generation. Now, my beautiful, wonderful wife Lisa was in the faith, but she was at a high school, and there was literally boy her age who is not really, she didn't consider marriage material. The priest didn't play well with, particularly with other parishes. No marriage whatsoever, none. So we ended up in basically, she would grab me out of college, which I don't recommend to anybody, but I mean it worked for us. And that, where we were, and then to the next generation, you, Eric, where you were basically trying to kind of form what we see. And now we fast forward to today, where we're having these, we're having podcasts, and we're having discussions about different theologies, and we're drawing people in, and we're even speculating on the possibility this is giving the 1962 mass to the SSP because he's worried about sedevacantists. Okay, we have come so far in 2 or 3 generations. It's amazing to behold, and I think are ahead of. So guys, I think, do we want to give some concluding words here? Let's maybe start, Boyd.
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for all this discussion today. It's good, and I hope that somebody out there sees this and looks into what we're doing instead of a contest, and God willing, converts. Just hearing how everything in life has a spin of our faith, and those people who are hopeless and thinking that all is lost, maybe we give them that hope back. So thanks for the opportunity to be on here and offer what little I was able to offer.
No, it's great, Eric. Eric, your thoughts, final thoughts?
Yeah, no, just fantastic discussion. Appreciate everyone's time coming on here, and everyone who's listening online, whether live or recorded, for an hour and 20 minutes now. But yeah, no, thank you. I mean, it's always refreshing to hear other opinions, other voices, but yet all tied with the same faith. So thank you all.
Absolutely. Frankie, last thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to thank you all for having me here, and thank everyone for watching. Just kind of final words. Standard thing, really. Stay strong, keep the faith, do your duties well, and pray your rosary, and do everything for the greater glory of God and the salvation of souls.
All right, thank you, Frankie, and Boyd, Eric. This has been a great show. I really appreciate you all coming on, and I hope that we can have you on again. We still haven't quite decided yet whether to have this Saturday Catholic IRL during Lent or not. We're going to be doing a little bit different format during Lent, and be basically reading, doing Lenten readings from around the world. If any of you guys are interested, we'll with you. and have you go. But yeah, absolutely. Until next time, guys, this was a great discussion, and I really appreciate it. So thanks.
God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you.